Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of the podcast. Mike Claiborne here on ClaibsOnline.com. And we have a special guest. Well, they're all special when they join me here on the podcast. But one of my favorites, longtime friend. He's a sideline reporter for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's also a indoor soccer league championship broadcaster as well. Do you have the ring, Fish?
No, I don't.
He's Rob Fischer, and he's my buddy, and it's great to visit with you, man.
Great to visit with you, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Hey, listen, we had a great visit this week, and for our viewers and listeners who haven't had a chance to read the Daily Memphian, it was a very moving story about you. It had nothing to do with sports, it had nothing to do with basketball, but you thought it was time for you to share an important story about your life that I know touches a lot of people. So if you would, because I want people to read this as well, but tell us a little bit about how you arrived and how you came to the decision of sharing your plight with the world.
It's something that, I've battled with bipolar suicidal depression I was diagnosed 17 years ago. And so I don't know how long I've actually had to battle it, but it's probably been longer than that. And it's something that really came to a head, and I had my darkest day just a few years ago in 2018 with thoughts of taking my own life that I didn't act on, but very close to. And it's something, I had to get to the point where I was comfortable with myself and telling the story and being vulnerable. And, I've wanted to tell the story for a long time because I've wanted to try and help people and people who might feel lonely like I do. And this just felt like the right time. It's been a tough time, I think, for people who have depression during COVID, because you always feel alone. And a lot of us have been alone during this pandemic. So it just felt like the right time. I felt like I was in a good place, and I was, Jeff Calkins is one of my favorite people, and a guy who can, turn a great story into poetry. And I really was happy that he, was going to do the story, and he wrote it beautifully, and it was a big release, Mike. Big weight off my shoulders, I think, talking about it, because the outpouring of support has been so refreshing and so inspiring.
Now, and that's the next question. The story came out on Friday. We're talking the following week. How much has your life changed since the story came out, or better yet, since you decided to share the story with everyone?
I told my wife Thursday, I said, my life's going to change tomorrow, and just kind of laughed about it. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I said,
you cooking dinner. She didn't have to worry about anything. You're going to take the trash out. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, I'll do that. No, and it has, man. I mean, it's been amazing to hear from people from high school, to hear from people from St. Louis who reached out, and people around the NBA. But even more importantly, just to hear from so many people that I've never met before in my life, and who are saying that they're there to support me, or the number of people. I mean, an amazing number of people who have reached out and told me their story, or their plight with depression, or someone in their family who has battled depression, or, I've had a few people tell me that they tried to commit suicide, or people who have contemplated suicide. And it's amazing to hear those stories. And it's been inspiring to me, because everyone has said pretty much the same thing. You're not alone. And that was kind of the whole point of coming out and talking about it, was to let people know they're not alone. So to see that point really has gotten through has been, it's been refreshing for sure.
One of the things that caught my eye was the fact you talked about you had the great job, you had a great family, and when people would look at you from a distance, they would ask, well, what does he have to be depressed about? But it was more than just that. So at what point did you feel like, okay, I've got all these great things going for me, and I'm still not where I need to be? When did it really start to eat at you with everything in front of you? Because people would think, well, what do you have to be depressed about?
Oh, I had a lot of bad days, but bad days would leave. The next day I'd feel better, and I knew, I see a therapist, I see a psychologist, I see a psychiatrist, I take medication. So I mean, I knew it was there. So bad days, a lot of times I could get through it knowing that tomorrow would be better. But it was May 28th, 2000 or May 29th, 2018, a day that I can't explain why it went to that next level, but I felt everything. I felt overwhelmed by just living, and everything. The thing about depression is it's so much self-hatred and self-blaming and self-loathing that just when you're overwhelmed like that, you feel like the world would be a better place without you, and those that you love, it'd be better for them without you, and there's no getting out of that thought. And it took friends who were concerned after I took the day off work. They were concerned and came over to the house and to check on me and to make sure I was okay. And it helped. And I was with some friends and I was with some family and I got through that night. But this was an instance that ended up staying with me for a good 4 weeks, 5 weeks, where every day it was that same feeling. And that was the day that I really thought, I really need more help, and I need someone to talk to on a more consistent basis and talk to them face to face. And so I did. I got help. I got a doctor, and my wife knew people in the industry and was able to land me one of the great doctors in town, who at first said that, she couldn't see me for like a month. And she said, nope, we need someone now. And was able to get that done, and, changed medications. And, it's still something I battle every day. It's still something where there are worse days than others. But I haven't had a day like that, and thank God, because it's scary just to think about it.
Was there something that would trigger what was going on, a place you had to go, or a person you needed to see, or an environment that you were in? I mean, was there anything that you didn't look forward to doing and you knew that this could probably set you off?
Well, I think there are certain things like that, sure. Because of the pressure, or I mean, even little things like going home to see family at the holidays. Knowing that everyone was going to be happy, knowing everyone was in a jovial mood and the Christmas spirit, and just feeling like I was not, and feeling like I was a fraud to people, and feeling that inside of me. I'm a fraud. People don't know really who I am. People don't know that I'm hurting inside. And so to be around that, I felt like I always had to put on a smile and put on a show of, not really who I was. And that was really difficult. And I think it's really hard for people with depression to hear that, but that's how we feel. It's tough to talk to family. It's tough to talk to friends. You feel shame, number one. And I think you also feel like it's hard to talk to someone who doesn't understand what I'm going through. And I think that made it very difficult, but some things trigger it, but most of the time it's just a day. I mean, it's just a day that you just don't feel right. And it's hard to fight through it.
You quoted Robin Williams in the story and talked about him, and we see a lot of people in the entertainment business, and obviously now we're hearing about more athletes that are going through this. And you touched on something about everybody thinking it's all good for you. Do you think that's one of the common denominators, the people that assume that it's all good, and you're in the entertainment business of entertaining people, and you may not be on your best day, and you just kind of roll it out there and hope that it sticks, but that's not really you? Is that what you're talking about? Maybe is trying to be maybe perceived as a fraud?
Yeah, and I think so. And it's not like when I work and when I'm on television that I'm faking it. I'm not, because I love doing it and I love to entertain people. And it kind of goes back to what Robin Williams' quote was, in that the saddest people on earth are the ones who are always trying to entertain others because they don't want them to feel worthless. because they know what that feels like. And, so I always try to entertain. I always try to make people laugh. I do it all the time, and I do it with a smile. And so, yeah, I think people look at you and, they just see what your TV persona is without really, knowing who you are. And that's fine. But then to be vulnerable and to kind of be human, I guess, over the last week, it's been eye-opening, when people reach out like that, because yeah, people wouldn't believe it. I've had friends before that I've told I had depression, and they were like, "Oh, what do you have to be depressed about?" And that's the worst thing to hear, But I think, and I don't mean this word in a derogatory sense, but people for a long time, I think, have been very ignorant when it comes to depression. Just not knowing. I don't mean that derogatory. Yeah. It's just unknowing about depression. But I do believe that a couple of years ago, when in a 2-week span, Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain both took their own lives, I think that was a big, big time for our society to realize, wow, this can happen to anybody. Fame, fortune, the best jobs in the world, you would think, always happy. I think people realized, wow, this can happen to anybody. And I think it was eye-opening. And like you said, to see NBA players come out and talk about it, I think has been very helpful. And former Missouri Tiger Keon Dooling has started an initiative around the National Basketball Association for the players to seek help mentally. And it's something the NBA has taken a lot of an active role with Keon Dooling to make sure, each team now has medical professionals who are psychologists around the team that are always available, and they're doing everything they can, because just statistically, there's someone in every locker room who suffers from depression and probably is hiding it, and you probably don't even know. So the NBA is trying to take care of that stigma as well.
Rob Fischer is our guest, and Rob, you have the trained eye now because you recognize what it did to you. Are you in a position where you can see some of the telltale signs that maybe somebody's moving in that direction? Have you got to that point yet? Or are you just trying to stay in your swim lane and try and learn as much as you can to be able to eventually pass it on to someone else?
I think it's hard to explain what signs would be. Because people hide it so well. Mm-hmm. But I think when, I've had a couple of friends of mine that when I told them Thursday that I was coming out about it, they knew. And I knew that they were going through things. It was just, you could just sense it about someone. But, I guess signs to look for: unhappiness, obviously, but unhappiness and the self-hatred is the big one. And, I think as parents, it'd be the worst thing to hear your child even say is, I hate myself. But you have to make sure that that is not a true feeling. That's just a child being a child. But, that's something when someone constantly is just blaming themselves for every problem in the world. That is something to look for. But, I think the big thing just is, if you're around unhappy people, just try and send a nice message to them, a nice text. And I hope more people will come out, and I hope what I did talking about it will help more people to talk about it. I've had people who have told me that they've suffered from depression for the last couple of years. And after reading the article, they told their wife for the first time, and they're going to a doctor next week for the first time. And I mean, those stories are so encouraging and so inspiring that I hope more people can come out and talk about it. And because, you're not alone. This is normal. It's normal not to feel normal, I think a lot of people say. And we just need to realize that. But it's up to the individual a lot of times to figure it out themselves. It really is.
I would think that COVID has had a little bit to contribute to a lot of people who are dealing with what you're dealing with. And probably accelerated it. But also for you, and you mentioned parents earlier, and we really have to monitor our kids these days because the isolation and the COVID itself is something that a lot of people are struggling with. What advice would you give people in that regard? If you're a parent, if you're a relative, and obviously it's a very fine line you have to walk because you don't want to be too intrusive, but you certainly want to make sure that you can step in and help them get the help that they may need.
listen to them. I was talking to a parent the other day who was telling me just watching his son play basketball and watching his son just not have that drive anymore. And he asked him about it, and his son broke down and basically said, I think it's bigger than basketball. I mean, so many of us our age and even a little bit older, we didn't grow up thinking, that we didn't grow up knowing what depression was. We grew up just kind of thinking, get over it. Get over it, man. But now it's real, and we've learned, and we've evolved, and so now it's real. So when you hear your kids saying things like that, you have to take them seriously. When kids can't get out of bed and are staying in a dark room and just have no motivation to do anything, that's a big sign. When they're just
and that's beyond when you break up with your high school sweetheart or things that we all grow through at an early age.
Right.
This will have a bigger impact, and you'll be able to notice this more than a breakup, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. Where it's just not right. They're just in their room too much, or just out with the lights out and just laying down, and because that's when you can be in your darkest place too. And so I think it's really just listening and looking for the signs, and someone who just feels alone all the time, but asking them, and getting help is just so very important. And like I said earlier, it's hard to get help. It's hard to talk to someone unless they know what you're going through, and that's professional help. Getting professional help is so important, and the stigma of it being embarrassing or sharing something with someone you don't know, you get over it quickly because they understand what you're going through. They can give you tools to try and fight through it, and when you get into a dark place, how you can possibly get out of it. So that's the important thing. Get help, take your meds. I mean, that's the biggest advice for people who battle from depression. Talk about it. You need someone to talk about it. You have to talk about it, or if you keep it inside, it will get to a point where it's overwhelming. And when it becomes overwhelming, dangerous things can happen.
I've known people who've dealt with this, and they try and make light of it. They try and find something that they can both, they never get out of the entertainment business, so to say. They'll say something about themselves that will remind you of what they're dealing with, but also remind themselves, and this is their way of trying to get through it. And I think, as you just touched on, being a better listener, I would think, is probably one of the keys for this whole thing. Being that friend and just listening. And they just might just want to talk. It may not be about their situation, but just talking is something I think is important here. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. It is. And, I think when I even mentioned in the article, I think people with depression, to talk about it, one of the scary things about talking about it also is you don't want a pity party. I mean, you don't want people coming up to you all the time. Are you feeling okay today? And walk around pins and needles, and you're watching a television show and you're like, hey, you want to watch Home Alone? I mean, so you don't want to pity. I mean, because a lot of times I feel great. I mean, today I feel great, and a lot of days I do, but there are still bad days. But if you know someone who has depression, and I think when you have depression, you have to tell people that, hey, don't give me a pity. Yeah. If you want to send me a quick text and say how you feeling, I appreciate that, and I'll thank you for that. And I think for me, and a promise that I've made to my family, and a promise that I've made to my television family, is the same one, that I won't lie anymore. When you ask now that when you ask me how I'm feeling, I'll tell you how I'm feeling. I'm not just going to say, oh, I'm great, like we always do. How you doing? Great. I'll be honest now. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I'll tell you if I'm having a bad day, just, hey, think about me and, send me good thoughts or whatever. But I'm not going to lie anymore when people ask how I'm feeling.
All right. I'll keep that in mind. All right. Let's talk some NBA. A lot of things going on in sports these days. And obviously with COVID, it's changed how we do our jobs, and it's had a significant impact. So for you, what are some of the biggest changes that you've had a chance to run across? And what do you hear from the players as far as the adjustments that they've had to make and still try and maintain some sense of normalcy, that be it a player in the NBA?
I think the players have done a really good job. I think the bubble certainly helped, to kind of get used to the environment of not playing in front of people, and an environment of playing. I mean, it's really odd, Mike, going to these games. I mean, when you see these games in an empty gym with music still blaring and some fake crowd noise pumped in. I mean, as a fan or as a broadcaster, you just kind of look around the building like, what this is. You can't get over the fact of how weird of a situation everything is. But the players, I think, have. I think they've kind of just gotten to the point where we're just playing basketball. The thing that I've noticed about the basketball is you look at the standings and so many teams are right around 500, whether it's a game above or a game below. I think this year more so than any other year, you're going to see a lot of parity because those home court advantages aren't the same anymore. Now it's just about playing basketball. And it's, man against man and team against team. And guys are just going at it. And I think, you don't have that home crowd. You don't have the home calls from the officials. You don't have that emotion of the game anymore. You have to build the emotion yourself. I think the players have done a really good job of it, but I think it's also made the teams a little more even on the floor because these are all great players. I mean, we know that going in, and I think the bottom teams are just a little bit closer now because it's tough. And then with the schedule of having those 2-game sets that you're playing, it's tough to beat a team 2 times in 3 days, especially on their home floor. So, those things I think have been very interesting. And, if you can stick around 500, I think you got a good shot of being in the postseason this year.
You know what's interesting about the fact that we don't have the home court advantage other than some team has to go play another team. You don't have the fans. We're going to have some guys that when the fans do come back are going to have to try and figure out how to make that adjustment of the impact of what fans will mean in a game, whether it's the loud crowds, the heckling, and all the other things that come with a sold-out arena. There going to be some guys who haven't been exposed to that, and how they weather that storm is going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, some rookies who they don't know what it's like. Maybe they were playing at, Hofstra in front of 1,500 a night, and they were like, wow, this is great, and now it's like, what's this going to be like? So
yeah.
I think it'll be overwhelming for a lot of guys when the fans do come back, but I think most of the guys are so competitive that it's just something else that drives them, whether it's the home crowd getting behind them or the road crowd getting on them. It's just another thing that fuels that fire and that competitive drive that these guys have. I've been impressed with how good the basketball has been considering the circumstances, and they've done a great job of kind of fueling their own fire, except for the fact that every time a guy makes a bucket now in the NBA, you hear the same thing after every basket. And one! They just scream every single time. So that's something that you've learned watching these games for sure.
Well, I'm amused by when you do have an open mic and you can pick up some of the banter between players because there's some good trash talkers out there.
Yeah.
And you're right. And they know how to say it and when to say it. I'm watching Rodney Magruder last night, who decides he wants to take on the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, I think Klay Thompson had the best line. Klay was standing right there. He said, here's a guy that probably won't be in the league next year anyway. He's on his way out, and he's out here trying to make a big deal about it. And Draymond Green just eviscerates him at a post-game press conference. None of that stuff you probably would have been able to hear, and it wouldn't have been as big of an issue had we not had open mics and had a chance to actually see what was going on. So I think from that standpoint, it has been fun to have that situation, and fans can really get a kick out of what goes on the NBA court. All right, so what are the chances of them having fans back in the arena this year? What are you hearing on that?
I think good. I was just talking to a friend of mine who works at the arena in Dallas, and they said for the Stars games, they're going to be adding like 1,000 more people every single game. And when the Mavericks, I think starting in February, the Mavericks are going to start letting fans in at like 25% capacity. So I think the NBA's hope, and the reason why the NBA only scheduled the first half of the season is because of games that have been postponed. Knowing that was going to happen. Now they'll be able to make them up in the second half of the season. And they're also, their hope is all along has been hopefully by March, we'll start to be able to have some people in the building. The Grizzlies, for example, we have had about 150, 200 people. It's just been players' tickets, families of the players, families of the staff, and that's it. And they're tested twice before they can even come to the game. But I think starting next week, the Grizzlies are going to be able to have up to 3,500 now in the building. So it sounds as though they're slowly coming back, but as we all know, it's such a fluid situation constantly that it could go backwards before it goes forward. We'll just have to wait and see.
All right, let's go to the floor. Best team you've seen so far this year and why?
The Lakers are the best team. And I mean, the easy answer is because of LeBron James. But as a team, they are so good offensively. But what's even more impressive is how good they are defensively. They can shut down anybody on any given night. And, even if they're not playing well, they're going to be in a tight one. And when you're in a tight one and you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you're in pretty good hands. So I think the Lakers are still the best.
All right, best player not named LeBron that you've seen.
Oh, man. Shake Milton did a number on us this year. You're familiar with him.
No.
Man, it's been crazy because, well, we've only played 14 games, and we played Brooklyn twice, and we haven't seen Durant, Harden, or Kyrie Irving, so we got lucky with that. Played Philadelphia, and we did not see Joel Embiid. Ben Simmons is amazing. He might be the best player that we've seen in person. We played Boston but we played them on the road, so we're not traveling, so I didn't get to see that one in person. But I'm a big fan of Jason Tatum. I think he is a special player and is going to be special. But probably Ben Simmons, I guess, up to this point, might be the best player that I've seen.
All right, I'm going to take Doc Rivers, Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich out of the equation. Who's the one? And I'll take coach in Miami. I'll take him out of the equation too. I think he does a tremendous job. Eric Spoelstra. What coach gets it these days as far as how to coach in the NBA and how to be able to relate to players? And because this is a stars game and it's a players game. And if you don't know how to coach up your 2 or 3 best players, then nobody else is going to follow you. So who gets it?
Yeah, well, I think another guy that you have to put on that list, throw him out, is Rick Carlisle. I mean, I think Popovich, Carlisle, and Spoelstra are probably the 3 best in the NBA.
I used to think Carlisle was pretty good, but I don't know whether he's reaching guys at this point because they've been getting whacked. It's not like they've been losing. I mean, Fish, when they get one pinned on, this is about lack of effort. And you have to wonder if your coach is still able to generate enough interest from some of your key players.
Well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because I think up to this point he certainly has. I think he's always had a team that overachieves. Another guy, it's a great question because I think there are a couple of other guys too that really stand out for me. One of them is Terry Stotts in Portland.
Yeah.
This is a team, and they've gone through some awful injuries the last couple of years, but that's a team that people don't believe in and year out. And he just his team overachieves every single year. And he's got superstar players. He's got young players. He's got veteran players. He's had a great mix. And he's got guys that want to play for him. So I think he's been terrific. I'll tell you, one of the biggest surprises, I think, in the NBA to me has been what Quinn Snyder's been able to do.
That was who I was going to bring up. He just coached his 500th game.
It's unbelievable.
NBA. And when you think about
7 years.
Yeah, when you think about his tour duty at Mizzou, you wouldn't have thought he could have coached a men's league team and the Y. But I always thought he was a decent X's and O's guy. It was all the other things, and the NBA was better suited for him as far as his ability to communicate. He didn't have the white noise of recruiting and bringing on guys that can get you in trouble. The NBA was probably a better fit for him. And, Rob, I think there are a lot of coaches that would serve better coaching in the NBA than they would college. And I know guys work their way up and they have to go through the college rank, but I think there's enough roadkill that there's some guys who probably would do better in the NBA.
Well, and it's so much about relationships too.
Yeah.
Because I think any basketball coach, whether college or pro, they know basketball.
Mm-hmm.
They all coach. They can draw up plays, and they all do it on napkins all the time everywhere they're at. So they know the game. It's about how to manage the players, and I think in the NBA, it's so much about managing. It is such a huge part of it, and having the players trust the coach and the coach to trust the players, and they believe in each other. And, that's something I think Quinn has done an amazing job with in Salt Lake City. And, he's one of those guys, though, and it'll be interesting to see if they start to struggle, how it wears on you, because he wears them out. They got practices under Quinn's night.
So they don't have any walkthroughs, is what you're saying. Huh?
They got shoot-arounds that are more like practices. So when you're winning, that's okay.
Yeah.
And another thing he does, he really takes care of the veterans. He'll take care of the veterans and not overwork them. But they believe in what he's doing, and he's doing a job. I'll never forget. We were in Los Angeles. The Grizzlies were playing the Lakers, and I'm walking through the hallway. And before our game, there was a G League game, and Quinn was the head coach of one of the teams that was playing that day. And I see him walking down the hallway. He's carrying a clipboard, and he's carrying a bag of basketballs. And I thought to myself,
"Oh boy!"
And I talked to him for a couple of minutes, and I thought, well, good for him. He's not giving up. He's starting over, and he's starting from scratch. And then he gets an assistant's job in the NBA, and then he goes overseas for a year, and then he comes back in the NBA. Then all of a sudden he gets a surprise call as a head coach, and he's been great. I mean, he's been great. It's been a great surprise, I think, for Quinn.
Okay, give me a name of a player, and not a household name. I know about LeBron, I know about Durant, Steph Curry, and people of that nature. And Luka is obviously building a name for himself. Your guy in Memphis, John Morant, is one of those people that's starting to find his way in good conversations. Give me a player that people should probably pay closer attention to. And maybe he's not a scorer. Maybe he's a rebounder. Maybe he's a great defensive player, but somebody who catches your eye when he gets on the floor.
Domantas Sabonis of the Indiana Pacers. He is a special talent, and not the flashy talent. I mean, he can play above the rim, but that's not really his game. He is a mid-range genius, and what he does on the board is incredible. He's just a hard player on both ends of the floor. He's a nightmare to guard because of his size, and he's a nightmare when he's guarding you. He's great two-way player, fun player to watch. Another one I'll tell you, and it is because of his scoring, is Devin Booker. I mean, the guy, and now
if he's in any other market, a real NBA market, he would be splattered everywhere on billboards, and he would be maybe one of the faces of the league. I think the first time I saw him play in person, Rob, I was surprised at how big he was.
Yes.
I mean, he goes 6'7".
Yeah.
And he's stronger than he looks, but we always see him posting people up or taking, in your face jumpers. There's not much he can't do on the floor. And playing with Chris Paul, I think, is going to put his stock through the roof.
Huge. I think, Booker's shown that he's a leadership type of guy, but he's always had some young guys, and they just haven't had the talent around him. When they went out and picked up Jay Crowder and Chris Paul, I think it was huge for that team because it gave them that veteran presence, that playoff presence. And, Chris Paul is such a great leader himself. To what he does, I think, for Devin Booker has already shown for him to be a great player. He's an incredible offensive talent to watch. He could care a little more about defense, but offensively, he's as good as they come.
All right, final question for you. Let's talk about the Grizzlies for a second. When you look at the Grizzlies, as they get down the stretch, they're going to have a conversation about what element that's going to make them more than just a playoff appearance team. I'm talking about a team that when they get in, people are going to say, you better watch out for them. If they get out of the first round, they could be a handful. What conversation are they going to have in order to be better in that situation?
It's going to have to be finishing games. I think they went through it last year because they were young. This year, that excuse needs to go out the window. That they need to learn from that experience a year ago and finish games better. It's hard to talk about the team right now because they're 8-6, but they're on a 6-game winning streak. So it wasn't long ago they were 2-6, and now they've won 6 straight. But the thing that they're doing to win the 6 straight is they are guarding as well as anybody in the league right now. And for them, especially with some guys being down with injury that they're still trying to work back, that's what they're going to have to do every night. And I think that's something they learned in the bubble. The bubble was kind of a playoff experience for the Grizzlies, and they didn't show well, frankly. And I think a lot of it that they learned and they talked about in the offseason was we have to defend every night. And during this winning streak, that's what they're doing. And I think that, their identity was pretty much pace and space and run up and down the floor, play above the rim, alley-oops, turnovers into points, just kind of running up and down. But the way that they get after it now defensively, I think has grown into what their identity is going to be going forward.
Rob Fischer, I always love talking to you, my man. I am so happy for, and proud of you, and you sharing your story with the world. I bet you sleep better at night, and I'm looking forward to you just continue to enjoy your life and your family and your great career, man. I'm pulling for you, and I know you're going to be okay.
I appreciate it, Mike, and I love you, man, and you've helped me through a lot of rough times yourself. So you've always been there for me, and I love you for it.
And back at you, brother. I got you, because I know you'll have me when I'm an old fart. Well, I am hey, you know what? I have 40 years in the business this week, so I'm getting real old.
Yeah,
it was great to see you. It's great to see you continue to flourish, man, and give my best to your broadcast family. Brevin is my guy. And how's Eric doing? How's Hasseltine doing?
He's good. He's just, when we're in an empty arena calling games,
you can hear him,
and we can hear him so loud.
That's like Chris Kerber at a Blues game. You can be on the parking lot in the empty arena, you can hear Chris Kerber. And I love their passion. Both those guys are the same guy. They got great passion, man. Hey, listen, thanks for your time. Best of luck, and go Grizz, get clawed. What's the motto this year? We're not getting clawed this year.
No, it's what are we? Grizz next gen. Hustle and flow.
Hustle and flow. All right, I got to get some swag. He's Rob Fischer. I'm Mike Claiborne. We thank you for joining us today on the podcast, courtesy of our good friends from Mungonass Acura, the home loan expert Ryan Kelly, Ameren, Illinois, and as always, we love thanking our good friend, our home loan expert Ryan Kelly. We thank you for your time. We'll talk to you down the road. Oh.